Soon after, Bernard and Jennifer made their relationship public. They began posting pictures of their vacations, their outings, their moments together, each one a painful reminder of the life Julia had lost. And in a final act of cruelty, Bernard posted the divorce papers online, claiming that Julia had divorced him. He told the world that he was now a free man, leaving behind the wife who had once stood by him through everything. Julia cried herself to sleep every night, her heart heavy with grief. But even in the depths of her sorrow, something inside of her began to change. She wasn't going to let this destroy her. Not for herself, and not for her daughter. Soon Julia found herself drowning in a sea of sorrow and anger. The divorce papers Bernard had posted online were like salt in an open wound, a public declaration of everything she had lost. The woman she had once been, the confident, beautiful, and strong partner to Bernard, was gone. In her place was a woman left broken, devastated by the betrayal, her spirit crushed under the weight of loneliness and self-doubt. Her mind often wandered to the memories of their life before the accident, the vacations, the love, the smiles shared over dinner. Those moments seemed so far away now, lost in the fog of what could have been. She had tried to move on after Bernard's infidelity, but the thought of him with Jennifer, the woman who had taken her place, ate at her from the inside out. Despite everything, one thought kept her grounded: her daughter. She couldn't afford to let her daughter see her like this. She had to fight for herself, for her daughter, for the woman she used to be. But where could she even begin? It was in the quiet of her room, late at night, after a long day of therapy and emotional exhaustion, that Julia made a decision. She wasn't going to be a victim. She wasn't going to let Bernard's betrayal define her. She would fight to reclaim herself, to walk again, to build a life that was hers and hers alone. Her first step was therapy. It had been difficult at first, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Learning to live with her paralysis was one thing, but learning to heal the wounds in her heart was something else entirely. But she kept going, one day at a time. She met with her therapist regularly, worked through her pain, and slowly began to rebuild the strength she had once known. As her body started to heal, so did her mind. Each step she took, each small victory, brought a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt since before the accident. It wasn't just about walking again, it was about regaining control over her life, her body, and her destiny. One day, after months of hard work, Julia stood. She had a walker in front of her, and her legs trembled with exhaustion, but she did it. She stood on her own 2 feet. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized just how far she had come. She could feel the power in her legs again, the familiar sensation of standing tall. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Bernard, meanwhile, was unaware of Julia's progress. He was too caught up in his new life with Jennifer, posting pictures of their outings, pretending to be the perfect couple. He seemed to have forgotten everything about Julia, the woman who had once supported him, who had loved him through his flaws and successes. He didn't care about the progress she was making. He was too busy enjoying the life he had chosen for himself. But Julia wasn't looking for Bernard's approval anymore. She didn't need his validation. She had found something greater, her own strength. Then, a turning point came. Bernard and Jennifer attended a popular red carpet event in Lagos. The media was abuzz with the latest gossip about their relationship, and Bernard, ever the actor, was playing the role of the happy husband with ease. They were posing for pictures, laughing together, acting as if nothing had changed, as if their lives were perfect. Julia, still healing but stronger than ever, decided to attend the event as well. She had been invited by a few friends who had noticed her newfound resilience. It was a fashion event, a chance for her to show the world that she was more than just the woman Bernard had left behind. She had worked hard to regain her beauty, her confidence, and her independence. She wasn't going to hide anymore. When Julia arrived at the event, heads turned. She was radiant, her new strength and confidence shining through every step she took. Her dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and her smile was warm and inviting. She had become a woman reborn, a woman who refused to be defined by her past. As soon as Bernard saw her, his heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. The woman he had abandoned, the woman he had once seen as fragile and broken, was now standing before him, more beautiful and powerful than ever. The sight of her made his heart race, and for a moment, he was paralyzed, unable to look away. Jennifer noticed it too. She saw the way Bernard's eyes lingered on Julia, the way his smile faltered. She felt a pang of jealousy twist in her stomach. Bernard hadn't looked at her like that in months. He had always adored Julia, and seeing her like this, the woman he had left behind, had brought something inside him to the surface. It was regret, mixed with longing, a feeling he had buried for too long. Jennifer, sensing the shift in the air, felt the jealousy rising. She took Bernard's arm, pulling him away from Julia. But it was too late. The damage was done. Bernard had seen it, he had seen the woman Julia had become, and it was clear to him now, he had made a mistake. Julia, however, wasn't looking for Bernard's approval. She wasn't looking for his validation anymore. She had moved on. As the event went on, she mingled with guests, posing for photos, laughing, and enjoying herself. She was finally free from the chains that had once bound her to Bernard. As the night came to a close, a fan, who had been watching the interactions between Bernard, Jennifer, and Julia, captured a photo. It was a candid moment, Bernard staring at Julia with a mixture of admiration and regret. The photo was posted online, and soon it went viral. The caption read, "Bernard, starstruck by his ex-wife at the event. What happened to them?" The post exploded across social media, and people began to comment, wondering what had gone wrong with Bernard and Julia. Some expressed their support for Julia, praising her strength and beauty. Others questioned Bernard's decision to leave her. The once perfect couple was now the subject of public debate. Bernard, however, could no longer deny the truth, he had made a mistake. And Jennifer, noticing Bernard's change in demeanor, began to feel the cracks in their relationship. She wasn't the one who had Bernard's heart. It was Julia. As Julia's popularity grew, she began to receive invitations to more events, including movie premieres. Her confidence, strength, and resilience had made her a beacon of inspiration to many. She was no longer the broken woman Bernard had left behind. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the world was beginning to see it. Meanwhile, Bernard and Jennifer's relationship continued to crumble. The tension between them was palpable, and the more Bernard followed Julia's journey on social media, the more it became clear that he wanted her back. But Julia was no longer the woman he had abandoned. She had found herself again. And she wasn't going back. As Julia's popularity soared, Bernard found himself trapped in a maze of regret and confusion. The more he saw of Julia's transformation, the more he realized just how much he had lost. The woman he had left behind, the woman he had abandoned in her time of need, was now thriving. She was stronger, more beautiful, and more successful than ever before. She had rebuilt her life, and it was clear that she no longer needed him. Bernard's marriage to Jennifer, once a beacon of hope and a fresh start, had crumbled. Their relationship, which had been filled with passion and excitement at first, was now a shell of what it had been. Jennifer could sense that something was wrong. Bernard was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. He was consumed by his obsession with Julia. He followed her on Instagram in secret, stalking her posts, admiring her photos, and leaving comments under her pictures when Jennifer wasn't around. One evening, as they sat together in their living room, Bernard's phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a picture of Julia at another glamorous event, looking stunning in a floor-length gown. She was surrounded by fans, posing for photos, radiating confidence and grace. Bernard couldn't look away. "What's going on with you, Bernard?" Jennifer asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "You've been staring at her picture for minutes now. Is this what you've been doing behind my back?" Bernard looked up, startled. His mind raced. He hadn't meant for Jennifer to find out, but there was no denying it now. His obsession with Julia had become an open secret, and he couldn't pretend any longer. I don't know what's happening, Jennifer," Bernard said, his voice shaky. "I can't stop thinking about her. Julia, she's changed. She's not the woman I left. She's stronger now, and I can't help but admire her. I made a huge mistake." Jennifer's eyes narrowed, her jealousy and anger rising. She had always known there was something more to Bernard's feelings for Julia than he had let on. She had never been able to compete with the memory of the woman Bernard had once loved, and now it seemed that Julia had only grown more beautiful and irresistible in his eyes. "You think I don't see it?" Jennifer spat, her voice rising. "You're still in love with her, aren't you? You're still hung up on your ex-wife, and you're using me as a distraction." Bernard didn't respond. He knew she was right. He had been using Jennifer to fill the void that Julia had left, but it hadn't worked. Nothing could replace the connection he had once shared with her. Nothing could erase the regret that gnawed at him every day. Jennifer, hurt and angry, stood up. "I can't do this anymore, Bernard. I won't be your second choice, your backup. If you want Julia, then go to her. But don't expect me to be here when you come crawling back." With that, Jennifer walked out, leaving Bernard standing alone in the dimly lit room. He felt the weight of her departure like a ton of bricks. But there was no time to dwell on it. Bernard knew he had one last chance to fix things. One last chance to win Julia back. Days later, Bernard saw Julia at a charity event, a prestigious gathering where she was the guest of honor. She looked radiant, poised, and completely at ease. The room buzzed with admiration as people flocked to her for autographs and pictures. Bernard stood in the background, watching her with a mixture of awe and longing. Julia, noticing him from across the room, felt a strange mix of emotions. She had spent so much time working on herself, rebuilding her life, and now here he was standing in front of her, the man who had abandoned her. His presence stirred something deep inside her, but it wasn't love. It was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It was the realization that she had moved on. Bernard approached her cautiously, unsure of how to begin. He was no longer the confident man he once was. Instead, he was a shell of the person he had been, consumed by guilt and regret. "Julia," he said, his voice low. "Can we talk?" Julia turned to face him, her gaze cool but unwavering. She had seen the pain in his eyes, but she also saw something else, an emptiness. Bernard had come to her, but he wasn't the man he used to be. He wasn't the man she needed. She had moved forward, and there was no place for him in her life anymore. "I don't think there's anything left to say, Bernard," Julia replied, her voice firm yet gentle. "You made your choice. You chose to leave me when I needed you the most. You abandoned me, and now you want to come back into my life. But it's too late." Bernard's heart clenched as he heard the finality in her voice. He had hoped for forgiveness, for a second chance, but the truth was clear. He had lost her. He had lost everything. "I'm sorry," Bernard whispered, his voice breaking. "I made a huge mistake. I was selfish. I thought I could move on, but I can't. I miss you, Julia. I never should have left you." Julia looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "I've learned to live without you, Bernard. I've learned to be strong on my own. I don't need you to complete me. I'm already whole." The words hit Bernard like a slap in the face. He realized, with painful clarity, that Julia was right. She had found herself again. She had rebuilt her life, and now she was thriving without him. He had lost her, and no amount of apologies would change that. As Julia turned to walk away, Bernard reached out a hand, but she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had her daughter, she had her career, and she had her own strength. For the first time in years, she was free. Free from the man who had once been her everything. Free from the lies. Free from the past. Bernard stood there, frozen in place, as Julia walked away. He had lost the love of his life, and there was nothing he could do to get her back. As he watched her leave, a wave of regret washed over him, but it was too late. The woman who had once been his everything was now thriving without him, and Bernard was left to deal with the consequences of his choices.